lovelies, welcome to another episode of Rwanda Now and Then, which is where I go back through a diary I kept for 2 years between 2007 and 2009 when I was here as a voluntary services overseas volunteer. I was a sign language researcher. And in the last episode, I had just arrived in Rwanda. It was November 2007 and I had just landed in Rwanda and been whisked away to a training centre called Armani Guest House, or Centre Armani. And between recording that episode and this episode, I discovered that Armani Guest House is still there today. The whole of the city has sort of grown up around it, but the guest house is still there, and I went to visit it. So I made a whole little video about going to visit Hotel Armani after almost 20 years. And yeah, it was kind of, it was a real trip down memory lane. So in this episode, I've arrived in Rwanda and I'm on in-country training at Armani Guest House. Okay, Tuesday the 6th of November 2007. So I landed on the 4th of November. This is 2 days later. And also I'm still writing in British time. I haven't fully integrated into the time zone yet. So I said in the last video that for half of the year, during winter, Rwanda is 2 hours ahead of the UK, and during summer, we're 1 hour ahead. So yes, I'm still writing GMT +2. Mazungu! Okay. Some crazy rain today. So yes, I would have been arriving in the short wet season, so definitely a bit of rain going on. Some crazy rain today. It's sometimes so hard that we can't hear anyone in the room speaking over it. Having another power cut now. So yeah, I said power cuts are a major issue then. They still happen a lot today. This year has been particularly bad, but on the whole, year on year, the electricity gets better. And also the roofs of the houses, so Armani Guest House and also my house here, is sheet tin. So of course when it rains heavily, it's like being inside a giant drum. You cannot hear yourself speak. You cannot hear anything. It can be quite impressive. Okay. Occasionally you hear singing and clapping from the church next door, or, as last night, a strong male voice ringing out across the town from a local mosque. The Muslim community in Rwanda is actually quite small. I think it's only something like 4% of the population. I'll have to check. But what it lacks in quantity, it makes up in quality, because the oldest part of Kigali is Nyamirambo, and that is the Muslim quarter. So there are a few mosques in town. And yeah, it definitely has a very important part to play in the history of Kigali. There's also quite a lot of halal food around. I've seen people asking on forums like Reddit, can you get halal in Kigali? Yes, there are a lot of Muslim food shops. Biryogo, if you go down the car-free area in Nyamirambo, which is now a street cafe kind of area, you'll find a lot of halal food down there. So far, 2 people have been ill, one with an intestinal infection and the other not sure yet. Neither serious though. First one has antibiotics and looks well again. VSO have a car and driver on standby for anyone who needs to go to the clinic, which is good. Certainly coming from the UK, your expectation of going to countries in Africa and in Asia, I think it's getting less of an expectation now because standards around the world are increasing. But certainly, you had a lot of fear put into you about, getting intestinal problems. Malaria, of course, I've spoken about malaria in the preparation up to leaving for Africa. In the UK, we have a term deli belly, and deli belly is, the squits, diarrhea, tummy ache from eating bad food, which, was linked to the idea of a lot of British tourists going to India and picking up things from the water or from the food. As I say, I think nowadays there's less fear about it, because standards worldwide are increasing in terms of food safety and preparation. Or it could just be because I've been here for so long that I don't worry about it too much because, I don't get sick often. I wouldn't say that I get sick from food here more than I do in the UK now. But I would say back then, I think I maybe did a little bit, but not to a crazy degree. Let me know if you are travelling to Africa for the first time from a European or a British country. Do you still worry about the food that you're likely to eat? Do you still have a perception that there is more likely to be food poisoning or not? I don't know anymore. I feel like standards now are pretty good. I feel fine, though I'm a lot more tired than yesterday, and the training involves more long discussions, hard to stay awake. I mean, yeah, I had literally just flown all the way from the UK. I spent like 7 hours doing nothing in Nairobi airport because it's like an 8-hour flight to Nairobi, and then you had to wait around for 7 hours just to get a 1-hour flight to Kigali. So I arrived, I was knackered, and I went straight into in-country training on arrival, plus the night before we'd all been down the pub. So, I think the journey was catching up with me. And of course, when you first get to the airport, you're like really excited, like the adrenaline of, traveling off across the world for the first time. And then I think like a couple of days into it, like exhaustion was catching up with me. Just bought some jewellery to send home and handmade cards that another VSO person is selling. The jewellery is made from paper beads, really amazing. They are made by disabled people in a centre in Gahini. Yeah, I do remember back then, about 20 years ago, paper beads were all the rage. They were necklaces and they looked really nice. They looked like they were made from multicolour beads, and they were just little pieces of paper that had been sort of twisted up. I'll see if I can find a picture or an example of them, but they're really pretty. But everybody was buying them back then. They were all over the place. Just had lunch. I really like plantain, a very savoury banana like potato. High carb diet and no such thing as milk unless you live near a dairy or supermarket. It's all powdered milk but tastes okay. I think I mislabeled that. I don't think it was plantain that they were serving. I think it was matoke, which is savoury banana. So it is very, very, very much like a potato, and you find it all the time. So in Rwanda, the most common form of meal that you will find is called a mélange. A mélange just basically means a mixture, so it's a buffet. And I've spoken about this a few times before, but it's very carb heavy. You'll find some form of potatoes, peas, vegetables, noodles, rice. You'll find some meat or fish or chicken. And one of those dishes is almost always matoke, which I actually think is the Ugandan word for it, but plantain is like a smaller banana and you fry it with butter and it's amazing. But matoke is just like potato. It tastes like potato. It's got the consistency pretty much of potato. And you usually get that in a sauce. So I think when I say the plantain, I meant matoke, but in the UK, the only type of savoury banana or slightly savoury banana that I would have heard of would be plantain. In those days. So the other big one there that I've just touched on is it was pretty near impossible to find liquid milk. I'm sure there were milk bars that you could go to. Like even today, I've got one up the road. There is a milk bar and you can go and buy milk. But then pretty much everybody in the country was using Nido. So it was made, I think, by Nestle, and it's powdered milk. And back then you could get a large tub of it. And I don't know exactly how much it was, but it was a big tin. And it was expensive for the time then. I think it was about 5,000 francs, which is about, I guess, £2.50. Now, when you see the prices online, mind blowing. Like it's going for like 90,000 francs, it's so expensive now. And it's just bizarre because There's a couple of things now that I just can't wrap my head around. Like Nido used to be pretty cheap. And now it's so incredibly expensive. And the other thing, sorry, I just had to go and find it, is chalk candles. So we always used to use these to filter water, to make it safe to drink. And you need about 3 or 4 of these, depending how big your water filter is. But they used to cost about 3,000 francs each. And now they are almost impossible to find. We're all using these plastic bucket ones now called Purifier. They've got like a ceramic flower pot inside that drains the water. But we always used to use these, and now I can't find them anywhere. And online, there's something like $25 for one. And I'm like looking at that going, wow, like times they are a-changing. So anyway, moving on. Yeah, that's why I'm reading back through this. It's kind of letting me look at Rwanda back then, 20 years ago, and now. Had a long Kinyarwanda lesson this morning, which wasn't so much fun. A lot of vocabulary, and I don't have a book for it yet. Did learn some very useful phrases though, like Ntabo nitwa umuzungu mfita izina, which means I am not called Muzungu, I have a name. This is because people tend to follow white people around calling Muzungu all the time. Apparently it can get a little bit too much some days. Oh, I had no idea then. Oh my goodness, I had no idea then. Muzungu just means foreigner, and you will have it shouted at you mercilessly. It used to happen all the time in Kigali. Nowadays, it's actually quite rare to hear it in Kigali. Kigali is becoming quite cosmopolitan, and that's quite international. There's people here from all over the world, and it's kind of started to calm down a little bit with that. But the moment that you step onto a back street, or the moment you leave the city, it's going to be like, Masange! 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 People just love to shout at people who are different and point out the fact that they are not from here. It's not usually malicious. It can be. It's very rarely malicious. It's just sort of I don't know. People just do that. We also put to rest the controversy over whether you pronounce it Kigali or Chigali. Because sometimes you will hear people say Chigali. It's quite rare. It's usually a hard K, Kigali. But Chigali, you'd heard that a lot. So apparently people from the north of Rwanda have a slight Ugandan accent and pronounce it Chigali. But the majority say Kigali. In Kigali itself, you'll hear both pronunciations because so many people live here. The government now pretty much originated, the higher echelons originated in Uganda and grew up speaking English and also having a bit of a Ugandan accent, I think, and probably speak a bit of Luganda. And the ch sound, apparently, from what we learnt in class, mostly came from the north of Rwanda and sort of the Ugandan sort of diaspora. And people in the south, or people sort of in Rwanda, would say with the hard Kigali. I don't know. I've heard variations on that over the years, and some people outright dispute it. So I don't know. Not a very important point, just an interesting one. We then had a talk on the education system. In the evening, the head of police for the GBV, Gender-Based Violence and Violence Against Children unit, came to talk to us about the high rate of attacks on children, sexual abuse, illegal abortions and infanticide in the country. Oh, I remember this. Yes, I have very strong memories of this. He showed some very graphic pictures. We all left a little dazed. He was a really nice guy though, and it was interesting stuff. All abortion is illegal here. The age of consent is 18, but you can't get married until you're 21. The only exception for abortion was just after the genocide, when women who had been raped were given the option. Now there is a special medical unit only for rape victims. Abortion is illegal, but in those circumstances, well... yeah. I remember that session very clearly. It was, I I mean, yeah, it was in at the deep end. It was in at the deep end. As I said, I was surrounded by people who had already been through one round of in-country training. I was late arriving to Rwanda, so for me, this was my first round. So everybody else in that session had had a couple of months to adjust to living in Rwanda, you know, in their placements, in their jobs, getting sort of used to the culture and everything. And this was my third day. And we had the head of gender-based violence unit turn up in his police uniform. He was a really nice guy, actually. I think I was just blown away by how open he was, you know, and how much information they were sharing. Wow. Okay, we're going to get into a lot here. The pictures, I'm trying to remember. So the main crux of the talk, and I don't think I put it in the blog, was I didn't put it in the blog. I'm gonna just say it out loud. Yeah, they were saying that they were seeing a high rise in infanticide, which is when you kill your child, and what it was there was still quite a lot of conflict going on, especially over the border in DRC. And there were a lot of women who ended up with unwanted pregnancies, often through, I don't know how often I can say the word without getting demonetized on YouTube. It has some funny rules about what you can and can't say. So unwillingly made pregnant, shall we say. And the police were finding a lot of babies had been left under boxes and in the street, and that's what he was talking to us about. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, the point of the session was to make us aware of the struggles that many women were facing. And of what the law was. I think he gave us his number if we knew women in our places of work and what we were doing that needed help. And or had been in some way abused. That nowadays, today, there's something called the one-stop shop. They are specific centres for women to go to, and also, the rules on abortion have changed. Back then, it was an absolute no in every circumstance. Nowadays, I was reading an article about it recently. For quite a long time now, there have been 5 circumstances under which you can legally get an abortion in Rwanda. And it's something along the lines of, I can't remember all of them, I think, but I'm fairly sure rape is one of them, incest is another, forced marriage, underage, and medical emergency. I think I just got the abortion bingo there. Yeah, I'm definitely getting demonetized, but I don't care. We need language to talk about these things, and we shouldn't be ashamed of using the correct language and the correct terminology. So those are the 5 circumstances. Now, I believe... Now, this is what I was reading in the article. You see, there's always this big problem, same as the problems in Ireland, where a young woman died in childbirth in Ireland because abortion was banned in Ireland because it's a very, very Catholic country, conservative Catholic country. And so a woman died there from medical complications because the doctors were too afraid of being losing their license for conducting an abortion to save the mother's life. So both the mother and the child died. And that led to a huge vote in Ireland where people were flying in from all over the world to cast their vote. And they overturned that, and abortion, I believe, is now legal in Ireland since. So abortion was legalised in the Republic of Ireland on December the 20th, 2018. And what was the name of the lady? So the case that I'm thinking about actually happened a long time before, in 2012. Savita Halapanova, who was 31 years old, and she was denied a life-saving abortion, and both her and the child died. And at that point, Ireland went, no, hold on, this isn't isn't right, But that was a huge overhaul because, as in Rwanda, you always have to come up against conservative religion, and conservative religion that quite enjoys taking control over women's bodies and subjugating women, telling them their place in society, telling what they can and can't do with their own bodies, and telling everybody that they're sinners and they're going to go to hell, because that's a fun thing to spend your life thinking, isn't it? I mean, I'm sorry, you know where I stand on religion, but it's just silly. So anyway, at that time in Rwanda, abortion was completely illegal. I did not expect to be having this entire education on gender-based violence and infanticide and abortion laws on my third day of being in Rwanda, but it was in at the deep end, and I'm like that. I had come straight off a linguistics course where I had been studying forensic linguistics, which is to do with language in rape trials in the court of law, and how language persuades juries and things like that. So I have a mind that is quite interested in these things, and I would rather know the facts and figures straight off the bat than, kind of not know and be stumbling around. So yeah, there's that. But as I said, today there are 5 circumstances under which a woman can get a legal abortion. But what I was reading recently in a paper, I think that under medical health, I think the mental health of the woman is also taken into consideration. Let me just check. This is the bit. When I was reading the paper and the changes to the abortion law, I had a little ooh in my heart. I felt that Rwanda had made a very big step forward, because under health risk, you can have an abortion in Rwanda if the pregnancy poses a risk to the physical or mental health of the mother or fetus. That is wording that's very, very important, because that puts it on a par with British abortion law. Is here, I believe you need 2 doctors to sign off. It's the same technically in the UK. If a woman in the UK wants an abortion, she has to go to the GP and ask if she's not paying privately. And often she will be asked questions about whether or not she's truly thought this through, whether or not she's being pressured into an abortion, whether or not, it is the right thing for her to do. And mental stress is absolutely an acceptable reason. So, if she turns up and she says, I am not ready to be a mother, I can't do this, I physically, mentally cannot do this in the UK, that's fine, that's grounds. So that wording, I would suggest, does put women in Rwanda on slightly more even footing. I would say that how doctors here treat women, this is a very different discussion to have, but I'm not going to go into it now, but it can be more difficult for women to talk about these things because the overwhelming majority of doctors in Rwanda are male. Very hard to see a female doctor. And when it comes down to marriage and families and pregnancy, there's still an extremely conservative approach to it. And if you are, if you know as a woman that it's not right for you at this time, but you're met with a very conservatively religious male doctor, you might not be able to get the assistance that you probably need in the same way that you would in the UK. But legally, there is the potential there for a woman to have the right to an abortion if she is not emotionally ready for it. And that is the crux. That is the important thing for women. And I think, that's such a big change. When I arrived in Rwanda, abortion, absolutely not. But now I think it has progressed quite well. And it's interesting looking back on that. So anyway, that was day 3. Oh my goodness. I was just checking the time there. My goodness. Yeah. Okay. And something else that came up in this discussion, this presentation, was that at the time the Rwandan government did not recognise homosexuality or injecting drug addicts. So I think there was not really an acknowledgement that there could be injecting drugs. I don't think it was very wide at the time. It still isn't today. I mean, there is drug dependency now, and I do know that cocaine is in the country. I think back then it was almost exclusively marijuana and alcohol, possibly glue. But even so, substance abuse it's not high because it's not easy to get hold of, and I think possibly quite expensive comparative to wages. But I'm saying that back then, technically, homosexuality and injecting drug addicts in the eyes of the law did not exist. So there was no support or rehabilitation for drug addicts. So yeah, there was no support for people who were being discriminated against on the basis of their sexuality. This is something that has also changed in a big way over those 20 years. All of this. I think too much to get into right now. I think we've covered the heavy stuff for today. Oh, yeah, there's a lot more to come. I have just spoken to Mum and Dad. My phone works. Yay! Because I was having problems getting my MTN, which is a network here, MTN SIM card to work because the helpline was only in French. So I had to find somebody to help me to set up my phone, but I got it set up. And I spoke to my mum and dad, all good, but absolutely shattered. The jet lag has caught up with me in a huge way. I need to sleep. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of jet lag. I was only 2 hours ahead of the UK, but like I have been on the move for a good couple of days to get there. And I think everything was just a bit overwhelming, like 2-hour-long Kinyarwanda sessions and then a whole discussion about gender-based violence. And plus I didn't know anybody really yet. So it was all a lot. Plus also, what I didn't really think about then, or I wasn't aware of, the altitude difference, because Kigali, as I always say, is higher in altitude than the tallest mountain in the UK, which is Ben Nevis. And yeah, that takes its toll, because when you first arrive in Rwanda from sea level, it can make you feel very tired, and also you sweat a lot more, you know, you get tired a lot more, and that lasts for a good couple of weeks when you first arrive, and then you kind of like even out. So, whew, that was a lot to cover. I'm going to stop there, I think. The next post is also quite long, and I think we've covered enough for today. Yeah, I mean, I did know when I started this that the blog would bring up a lot of things I could compare with today. So stuff that was happening back then compared to stuff which is happening now. And I knew that would be a fun part of the blog. But there will also be a lot of heavy stuff in here as well. And I definitely think that more than 1 or 2 of my vlogs are probably going to get demonetized because you're not allowed to say the word rape. I think you are. I think under monetization, you're allowed to talk about it, providing it's in a sensitive context or an educational context, which I believe this is. But you can never quite tell with the algorithm and with YouTube policies. So not a big deal. I think it's important to say things as they are and to talk about important things using the correct language for the time. I don't like this kind of like trying to find other ways of saying exactly what you mean. I'm very British. I'm just going to say what I mean, and YouTube can do with that what it likes. But anyway, yeah, so I am going to stop here and hopefully see you in the next one for some slightly more upbeat reminiscence, and bye.